Welcome into the voice of college football on Notre Dame. I am your co-host, Patrick Previty. That is Brendan McAlinden. Today, we're going to be talking all things Notre Dame football per usual. First of all, it's been a minute. We've been on a little bit of a hiatus. It's been about 3 weeks. How you doing?
Good. How was doing your civic duty and sitting in on jury duty?
I got $15 a day in the
Yep.
state of Florida, and very appreciative of it, but very glad it is over.
I just, in my now, I'm a man now. I'm 40, and in my 40 years of life, I've never received jury duty a single time ever in my life. And you
Oh,
sent
really?
me, yeah, and you sent me the message. We're gonna have to push them jury duty. And I'm like, man, I've never done jury duty.
It
The
could be
next,
different.
the
It could be different for different places, but I'm almost tempted to say you might need to check what your home address is. You might be getting
well,
you might be getting that mail somewhere else.
I'm I'm not
Oh,
because I literally was just called for jury duty.
wait,
Uh,
what?
I I've been called for jury duty in the month of June.
Wow.
Yeah,
Well,
and I'd never
my
been called for it, and I was
condolences.
like, I hadn't thought about it, and I was like, man, I've never been it, and literally a week later, I get a summons.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah, I mean, I
No,
remember because you can kind of get out of it too. Like the closer it gets up to it, they have like a couple groups of people that they end up saying, "Hey, you don't have to show up." So that's always what you want.
I got my
So
fingers crossed. I
yeah,
do jury.
that could be you. That could be you.
That could be me.
But it was very interesting. While I was there, I was thinking about Notre Dame and obviously thinking about this Notre Dame versus USC rivalry, or maybe the lack thereof in the future. I did make a video on this before you joined the channel with us here at Notre Dame on the Voice of College Football, and it was kind of just rumblings. You heard some stuff. The athletic director wasn't exactly committal to what was going on with the future of this rivalry. Now it seems like, with recent reports, that it's less likely to continue. I didn't know if you had any first thoughts here before we get going.
I mean, it's the rumblings have been there essentially for like the last month and a half. I mean, there's been rumblings that, and I don't know where it's originated. I don't know where the smoke is, but at some point, everybody started talking about this thing like it was a foregone conclusion. The USC was going to, for lack of a better word, bolt on the series. To put it, I guess, as nicely as I can say. I read that they're going to try and put a 1-year extension or something on it. Did you see that? Pat Forty had the big write-up today, which was the first time I'd ever seen anybody formally publish it from the national media. But I think it was the Clemson series where you really started to hear the rumblings, maybe the way that Pete Bavacqua said, we want to have another 100-year rivalry. And it's like, what do you mean another? Has something happened to the one we have right now? What? And then, now this comes out. I don't know, man. This is a giant bummer. I have big thoughts on USC with this. I am curious though. What are your thoughts? Because, I grew up in the 90s watching this rivalry, which was Notre Dame dominance. And then I became an adult in like 2003, right? I was 18. And I had seen no success against USC for for half of my adult life, right? The whole 2000s. And then I've seen it flip around. But have you ever known Notre Dame not to just dominate the series?
Admittedly,
Yeah.
not particular. Yeah, no, I have not. I obviously missed the Pete Carroll days at USC, and by the time Brian Kelly really got things rolling, they were kind of more so an afterthought. They had those years with Sam Darnold, Rose Bowl appearance, and everything like that. So they were obviously a very good team and a very good program. But yeah, I have known it more so as a one-sided rivalry, and I get. As a college football fan, you have to be aware of the tradition and the history. So I would have never seen this coming, and I don't want it to go. But yeah, no, for me personally, it's really just been the last. What did you say it was before we got going? 10 of the last 14.
10 of the last 14 and 6 out of the last 7. I mean, if you want to know if there's what reason would they do this move? And If the roles were reversed and it was Pete Carroll era, or USC had won 10 of the last 14 and 6 out of the last 7, they wouldn't be looking to get out of this football game. Absolutely not. This is pure and utter cowardice from USC. I mean, their whole assumption is that they're looking at this game like a loss. And what we were talking about before, this game should be seen as an opportunity for USC, and they're not looking at it that way.
Well, I'm glad that you brought up the point of me not knowing this rivalry, like being extremely close or being one-sided the other way, because that's the whole point. Is like, not all the time are you going to get these rivalries where it is truly back and forth. Both teams at the top, like Florida State, Florida, and like the 90s and stuff like that. Like, that's not common. There are so many rivalries that have, ebbs and flows and swings.
Ohio State, Michigan. I mean, Ohio State had like a decade of dominance, and then like the Cooper era, right, for Ohio State, but now Michigan's, had a run. Yeah, it's ebbs and flows like that.
And it's like that. And it's like, there's no reason to just not believe, based off of past history, that USC can't get to a point where they're on the other side of this. And that is what's the most disappointing thing ever, because hiding behind kind of the mileage, or just going to the Big Ten, stuff like that, other types of college football politics, whenever it's just really like, could be really summed up in the fact that if you lose 10 of the last 14 and you couple it with the other stuff, well, then maybe you would want to go, but it still doesn't make sense. What is so great too about these rivalries when they are in a swing like that is when USC were to pull off an amazing upset over Notre Dame, that ignites a year for them, a season, gets the ball rolling for the transfer portal in the winter. Like, that is like a big deal, a big thing. And to throw that away, I think it's not smart. It's not looking ahead far enough. It's just really assessing what is going on right now. And it's just giving up an opportunity at being great, playing great football, and keeping something alive for tradition. But also, I mean, come on, it's Notre Dame, USC. You're making money.
It's gone back since 1924. It has gone back since 1924. And if we've learned anything about USC over these past 2-3 years, it's the incredible level in which their athletic department behaves in the most unscrupulous way imaginable. They destroyed the Pac-12 conference, one of the oldest and most respected conferences in all of sports, the most gold medal winners, the most All-Americans, one of the most prestigious conferences in all of athletics. USC was instrumental in destroying. And they did it for Big Ten dollars. And no remorse with that. And then you take this Notre Dame series, and because you've signed up for this Big Ten schedule in which you're playing in Piscataway, New Jersey now, instead of, Berkeley, California, or Palo Alto, right? You're playing in Piscataway, and you're playing at State College, and you're like, well, there's travel expenses now. We got to cancel this Notre Dame. You took extra money, killed a conference, and now you're going to kill a 100-year rivalry so you can collect money from the carpetbaggers in the Midwest. The Big Ten just comes and destroys a conference, and now they're going to destroy a game that's been the longest and most storied intersectional rivalry in all of sports. And, it might be the biggest. You can make an argument like Celtics, Celtics Lakers, but it's not as long standing as Notre Dame USC. It's like it's in movies. It's part of the program. It's intertwined with their history, and they're going to blow it up for this Big Ten money because ultimately they're too scared of losing the game coupled with a Big Ten schedule.
And even somebody from my perspective, like, I get that. You know what I mean? Like, it's like not lost on the history is not lost on the fact that this has just been a one-sided series for the recent history. Like, that
I wasn't there for the Trojan horse green jersey game, right? I wasn't there for that. And I mean, I wasn't there for Pat Hayden's comeback victory against Notre Dame. Like, I wasn't there for these moments. I wasn't there for a majority of the 1 versus 2s or the, national championships lost and won with that game. I wasn't there for any of that. But like you said, like, we study the history, and that should mean something still, especially in a sport like college football, where what separates it from everything else is the history. And when you throw it out, you're just making some like watered down version of the NFL that no one wants. Nobody wants that. It's just
they don't have what makes college football different and special from the NFL is rivalries, atmospheres, stuff like this, games like this, where maybe in today's college football, sure, it doesn't need to happen. It doesn't actually need to take place outside of the postseason. But that's what makes it so great is that it still does, or it's one for one more season. And it's supposed to ignite fan bases, recharge programs and create these amazing moments that the NFL, while it is the juggernaut and it's, America's game in a sense, just simply doesn't have, especially in the regular season. Like, I genuinely think, now maybe this isn't the case for Notre Dame USC, but it's certainly the case for other rivalries, that there are fan bases that genuinely hate each other. Like, and
Yeah,
that is around college football. And it's just one more little nope taken away as the game moves and progresses to a state that's almost
it's
unrecognizable.
it's
And it's so
sanitizing it,
unfortunate.
right? It's creating this like sanitized hospital like the NFL is like home, the home games for a lot of it's mostly sanitized. You look at the Super Bowl, right? Corporate event, completely sanitized. And when you remove these weird things and rivalry trophies disappearing, right? Like Jewel Shillelagh gone. And it's like, what are we doing? And it doesn't, you don't have to do that. We talked about this pre-show. It's like if USC, let's say they are 9-2 and they've lost to let's just say Ohio State and Penn State, and they beat the rest of their schedule, and Notre Dame's the last game of the year. They're kind of a fringe bubble team, right? At that point for the playoff at 9-2, you didn't beat the two best teams you played on your schedule. Like, do you get in, or do we take the fourth or fifth best SEC team instead of you? A win against Notre Dame in that spot, boom, you have a win against the Notre Dame team that proven has been one of the 25 at minimum best programs, but usually around top 15, top 10, and now hopefully top 5 program. And you get that win. It's a statement win, and it puts you in the playoffs. Or you look at it and you go, well, we're kind of a fringe team. And if we end the season with Fresno State instead, that's a free win. Then we're 10-2, and let's just kind of hope chaos breaks out. So they're taking the coward's route. So instead of trying to propel yourself and make a statement and have a signature victory, you're like, I'm more scared of losing than I am winning that game, so I'm going to pass. And that's why I say the 10 out of 14, 6 out of 7 comes into play, because if this is Pete Carroll USC and you are routinely destroying Notre Dame in football games, you're not getting rid of the series. You're like, yeah, you can come play.
And I'm glad that you brought up the playoff seeding, because that's why I just think this is so short-sighted. And I completely agree, before I move on to that point, with if it was flipped, just no doubt in my mind, would there be this like delusion almost of USC is going to keep beating them for 20 more years. Let's sign this deal. Let's get this done. And let's make sure that we get that win. There's no doubt in my mind that it would be completely different the other way around, like whatsoever. But the seeding thing, I think, is so important, because we're only 1 year and going into the second year of the 12-team playoff. Let's not be so short-sighted on how the seeding works, how this process is going to continue on, and how these teams are going to develop, how these programs are going to develop. We just saw it with Indiana last year. You could lose to the top teams in your conference, not make that conference championship game, and you are not counting wins. You are counting where you are seated compared to those other teams. Like, your resume will be compared to those other teams as it would have been in a 14 playoff, as it would have been in any other year, and they need to be very careful of that. I think the conventional wisdom is, if I'm a 10-2 Big Ten team, I'm going to make it no matter what. And look at last year, that's going to definitely be the case probably. But what if there's 2 Big 12 teams that are serious contenders? Like you mentioned, like the 4th or 5th SEC team. I mean, the Big 12 kind of had a really weird year where they only got like one team in, obviously, and that was the team that won their conference championship game. But like, that could be something to factor in as well. Like, this is going to be a continuously evolving system, and these teams can now pop up way quicker than they could before. Why wouldn't you want to build your program up, have a very tough schedule, and have that be what you end up getting into the playoff with? Like, if they lose to Notre Dame and they are an elite team and they are 9-3, there is like really no actual penalty for that. Like, I really do think with the human aspect in this playoff that it brings you more to lose this game rather than just simply not play it. It is, if you get to that point where USC is an actual playoff team.
Yeah, because they got to get there first.
Yeah,
because they've never been to the playoffs. I mean, it's been you can dunk on Notre Dame for not having won a national championship since 1988. You certainly can do that, and you're welcome to it. And if I were a fan of a team that had won a championship from '88, I would be doing the same thing. But what you cannot do is you cannot deny that over the last 15 years, Notre Dame has been one of the 6 or 7 most successful programs in college football. 2 national title appearances, 3 trips to the playoffs. It's just, you can't argue with it. They haven't won a national title. They've played in 2 games. USC hasn't done any of that. They've never been to a playoff. They haven't played for national titles. They haven't done anything. And so, if USC fans want to, crow about that kind of stuff, they're certainly welcome to it. But in the last 15 years, Notre Dame has been substantially the more successful program.
And if you had told them that, well, I don't want to say 15 years ago, but let's say 20, there probably would have been a lot of skepticism to that point. Could they get to a point where they are truly national championship contenders again? Like, there would be a lot of skeptical people out there saying that was probably not going to be possible again, or it had been so long. And you currently could have said that, during the Brian Kelly era too, at plenty of times. And
they'd have a trio of Notre Dame players gracing the cover of the 2006 SI, college football preview. If there's I think it was Time to Shine. Was that it? Somebody's going to correct me in this video. But yeah, but they were skepticism back then, and Rick Riley famously wrote the op-ed in 2012 saying Notre Dame, sneaks over and whatever. I don't know. I just think that it's a very cowardly way to look at a team that's good and duck from it. You just saw Notre Dame sign a deal with Clemson, probably to hedge some of the bet. Afterwards, it came out that game's not going to count against the allocated amount of ACC games. Did you see that? So
yeah.
They'll still have to play a full ACC schedule on top of playing Clemson. And so what does that mean for the Stanford series? Because then you have a Stanford game, which I don't know if that counts against your ACC allocated amount. So every season you might be playing 7 ACC teams, maybe 8 some years. So I don't know.
That does get a little bit rough. From the Notre Dame perspective, but they have such great home and home series, and they got plenty lined up that I'm not really too nervous about that from their perspective. I keep going back to this younger Notre Dame fan thing because I thought it was interesting when we talked earlier about how excited I was for when they played Michigan again, and it was just something that excited me. And I didn't even really think too much of the USC rivalry. Obviously it was there, but I wasn't as excited as I remember being in those 2 games. And it was just this Clemson kind of almost pseudo rivalry does excite me, but still it's just one of those things where it's well, both of these teams are good. So of course it is exciting in the moment because I don't know what Clemson is going to be like post Dabo.
That's exactly it. I do have some trepidation about it, because I don't know. I know what Clemson was pre-Dabo. I don't know what Clemson would look like post-Dabo. And maybe he's a lifer, and he is accepting more from the changes to the game with he signed transfer portal players this year. It's a very, very big step for him.
Round of applause.
Yep. Thank you, Dabo. But yeah, I mean, he's got a team this year that looks like it should be one of the 5 highest ranked teams in college football to start the year. Clemson should be. Everybody's got Cade. I don't know how good Cade Klubnik's going to be, but you keep showing up and being a former 5-star. You do get those accolades when it's finally your year to do it. So it's what are we going to get?
That will be the question. All right, let's move into the fall camp rankings. What exactly we're going to get with that? Notre Dame routinely being ranked in the top part of those rankings, but I think just mainly looking at some of the teams that they're jockeying for position for. I know we've talked about this before. Your opinion on Penn State, rather.
Yeah,
I know that you're not as high on them, I think,
I am
as
not.
other teams, or maybe compared to Notre Dame. I didn't know if you had seen any sort of rankings that you wanted to pick on, or if it was specifically that the Penn State and Notre Dame pre-fall camp rankings.
Well, I mean that's a big one for me. So Joe Klatt put out his, and
Yep, that was exactly what I was thinking. I'm sorry,
that's
you can continue, but that's exactly.
The first one I saw was Andy Staples, right?
Mhm.
He's a pretty big name, and he had Notre Dame up, I believe, at number 2 in his, behind Texas, which I'm fine with Texas being up there. You can't. They lost a lot of wide receivers, and they lost a lot on their offensive line, and there's going to be some questions about, Arch Manning with new receivers and a new line and a first time, full-time starting quarterback. But he's got some game experience, and Sark's a great play caller, so and their defense should be pretty good. So, I'm fine with Texas. This Penn State thing, though, man, I don't get it. I don't have you're putting a lot on Drew Aller, and you're putting even more on James Franklin, and both of them have proven time and time again to be the anti-clutch. And I don't know how you can keep. It's like Lucy in the football, and Penn State they just keep pulling it. James Franklin keeps pulling the football, landing on their back. I don't know how you can put them one. I can understand Texas. I can understand, Ohio State, I guess, defending champs or whatever. And I guess I can understand Oregon, I guess. But the Penn State thing gets me. And, I've seen somewhere LSU's above Notre Dame, which I think is patently absurd.
Yeah, that's actually wild. I did not see that.
I don't know what I feel about. I mean, you with the LSU thing, they're going to be playing a murderous row schedule, and that I don't think that defense is still fixed, and I don't think you're running through the SEC with an unfixed defense. So I don't understand it. They might end the season probably 8-4, and I wouldn't be surprised. So whatever. But
I think some of it is looking towards the potential and what some of these teams may have. So like maybe not regarding schedules as much whenever we put like post-spring pre-fall camp rankings out. It's more so just like, okay, who do they got on the roster? Who do they have returning? Obviously Penn State has I think they've got, I want to say 15 starters returning, something like that. That's a common thing in a lot of those teams that were ranked pretty high was the amount of returning starters that they had. But I think it's looking towards that. But I would agree with you on the LSU point is just they have a lot of flaws where if I'm actually looking about how this season is going to turn out, I don't really know if I can actually put LSU above them if I'm also ranking it like that, that being Notre Dame, of course.
Yeah, I don't know. I think some of it too is there is some apprehension to put Notre Dame up there in some of the polls, and I think one thing I found interesting is that when Andy Staples did his, and he had Indy at 2, there wasn't as much kickback in either I think the Insta or the Twitter post that he made about it. Where a lot of times, if you saw Notre Dame in the top 10, people would be like, Notre Dame's overrated. I saw less of that. I think the playoff was quite the statement. And it's tough to really carry on some of the narratives against Notre Dame when you have the 3 playoff wins, including SEC champion Georgia and the aforementioned Penn State when Riley Leonard couldn't find a pass he didn't want to, couldn't find a completion, let's say, in the first half of that Penn State game. So I don't know. I just the Penn State one I take exception with, because how can you be down on Notre Dame and you see this team that year in and year out constantly fails you in Penn State and just never winning any big game or any game of note? You get a pretty easy draw to get to Notre Dame in the college football playoff comparatively, would you say?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it was SMU and Boise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that was that Kevin Jennings game where he just seemed to have crumbled under the lights.
Yeah, he just completely folded, just pick after pick, right?
And then for Boise, obviously just honing in on Ashton Genty, stopping that and just play your game. I think Penn State, like in a similar way, I of being a Notre Dame fan, I do want to, recognize, like, yes, both of these teams were kind of paired together over the last 4 or 5 years of just not being able to win that big game. But it is important not to go too crazy and recognize how far Notre Dame got compared to Penn State. These teams played last year.
Yeah,
and I did double check. Penn State returning 14 starters, 9 on offense, 5 on defense. But is it enough to put them higher than Notre Dame? And then also Joel Klatt had them at number 1.
Yeah,
that seems like that seems way too much for me.
You lost Warren, who was the whole offense.
Drew Allen's going to have to adjust. There are some people calling him Carson Beck, losing Brock Bowers. Like, it's a real thing.
He had 0 completions to a wide receiver in that Notre Dame game.
Yep.
I mean, 0. And it's not like he's got a bunch of 3-star talent. There's 4-star guys on that roster, man. And I know they're not performing up to value. And like Cardinal Tate was on that roster, right? And it's like there's guys there, or not Cardinal Tate. Who's the other Ohio State transfer? He had a former 5-star from Ohio State transfer in there, and like there's guys there, and he's just checking down to his running backs, and he's throwing it to Warren. Warren's throwing passes, and Warren's running the ball. And on defense, like Abdul Carter with like half of a shoulder against Notre Dame was the most disruptive presence the team saw all year. He probably is the best player in in the NFL draft this year, and it's like he's gone. And so the two things that really made your defense and offense, and I know they just got Jim Knowles, right? The defensive coordinator from Ohio State, but like the Knowles system does take some time to get going. So I don't know, man. It's just,
I have like
it feels disrespectful.
I think it is disrespectful. Here's one thing I'll go maybe on the other side for, and you can tell me if I'm right or I'm wrong. I think this quarterback battle needs to be settled, but it needs to be settled the right way. So you weren't going to name a starter, and it really appeared that way as spring went on. In the spring or after the spring game, you were going to take it in the fall and really assess what you got. So that drops you in the rankings. But if you had decided on your guy, whether he was actually the best or not, you just decided to make the decision and you were just going to live with that. And like I said, he could have just not been the best guy, but you have a name on your board or whatever. I definitely think that Notre Dame would have benefited in these fall camp rankings in that regard, because I was looking at the rest of Joel Klatt's top 25 and I had another one pulled up, and the consistent thing that I'm seeing of teams that are above Notre Dame are ones with that quarterback
being named
solidified. Yeah, obviously Oregon's Dante Moore, I believe, and then Cade Klubnik, you've already mentioned him, whatever he could potentially be if he is going to take that next step. And Arch Manning. And it's like, well, those teams have that quarterback, so I get the feeling of maybe just not, you don't want to roll the dice in your precious top 25 that you have preseason. You want to be right about as many as possible. So you at least like to know who exactly you're banking on. But as I mentioned in my whole soliloquy here, you have to make the right decision if you're Notre Dame. And obviously not basing it off of fall camp rankings. You got to take the time to do it. But without having that person named, it could end up, when we look at some of these things, that could also be a reason why.
That's a great point, because what it shows is it's sort of just big narrative.
Mm-hmm.
So Notre Dame, I mean, we pretty much are all certain it's probably going to be CJ Carr, and everybody's sort of like wink, wink, nudge, nudge on it. But yeah, if they'd named Angeli, then they could write glowing things about Angeli. If they named him.
Playoff hero is
the
back
playoff hero, and bowl MVP, and
they would have called him a veteran too. They would have called him a veteran, a player with experience.
Starts under his belt. Passes through
bowl games.
Yeah, I mean, as experienced as I guess Arch Manning, I guess, but
yeah.
But they didn't, because they want this to play out, because they don't really care. It is true Notre Dame has to be at their best the first 2 games of the year. I think they have to have their best ready to go for the first 2 games. But, Notre Dame's got the best running back duo in the country, all the shade to Penn State, because we stole your running backs coach who came to Notre Dame. So which room does he think is better? And the offensive line is going to be elite next year. So you got an elite offensive line and an elite running game, and that alleviates a lot of the concerns. You can say the same thing about Penn State, certainly. But, I feel really good about Notre Dame's defense. And, you look at the players coming back, and, Xavier Watts was phenomenal. And he would be greatly missed. But I don't think that's a loss on the level. I don't think any of the defensive losses is on the tier of, Drew Carter. But I don't know. The main part for me is it's just disrespectful because the two teams did just play. And if there was a narrative about which team was more deserving of getting some preseason hype and then not letting you down for said hype, I think Notre Dame might have earned the respect. And that's what all these polls are. All these polls, these top 25 polls at this point in the season, they're not based on anything. They don't have any practice footage. They don't know how good any of these teams are going to perform next year. Every single poll is merely these are the teams that I respect. So when you see a preseason top 25 poll, you are looking at what the publisher or the author of that poll, how much they respect your team. The higher they are, the lower they are. And Joe Klatt putting Penn State above Notre Dame says that he respects Penn State more than Notre Dame. I mean, that's all it is. And that's where I say I don't think you should respect Penn State more than Notre Dame. I think that is erroneous. And here we are, right? I mean, it's just that's what makes sports fun.
Yeah, that's what makes sports fun. You have a narrative to build into next season, and like we are obviously Notre Dame fans, and we have an ability to talk about Notre Dame here. And Joel Klatt's been accused by many of having biases of his own as far as the Big Ten is concerned. And it's just a natural thing when these rankings are, coming out, especially when you haven't actually seen these teams play each other or play football. So it's a normal thing. Shall we move to expansion?
Yeah, I think that's a sensible place to go after, preseason rankings, because how much are these going to matter if there's this proposed 16-team expansion? Have you seen the latest on this one?
So I did see that college football leaders continue to meet about potential playoff expansion. 14 to 16 teams being discussed. 4 auto bids for the ACC or for the SEC, for the Big Ten, 2 for the ACC and the Big 12, 1 for the Group of 5. And then 3 at large is the latest that I saw. What happened to the sport I loved?
I don't know, man. What is this? Like, why? So the original proposal is that they 14 and they're going to get rid of the auto seating, the seating, right? The conference winner stuff, which I'm fine with that. Just put the 14 best teams in, right? But now if you're pulling 4 from 2 separate conferences and like everybody else is getting scraps and like Notre Dame's got 1 spot that they're up for, it's like 1 at large / Notre Dame for 1 spot. And it's like Notre Dame can probably get there every year, but it's just creating this gross hierarchy where it's like 4 conference teams get in, huh? And it's like when we would get those BCS games where 8-4 Florida is going to the Fiesta Bowl, and you're like, what are we doing here, right? Like, what are we doing here where we're assigning the number of berths on, how much money your conference generates, which is essentially what they're doing. So I don't know. It's so dumb.
Did this proposal have the elimination of those championship games?
I didn't see anything about an elimination of the championship game, but that would be, another.
Okay, so when it comes down to this, last year I felt like the main issue was the lack of movement and feeling of impact for the championship games. For the conferences that felt like if you won it, you're in, and if you're not the winner, you're out. That felt impactful. But then there was a lack of changing in the seeding for the conference championship games for like the Big Ten or what have you, because those teams just simply didn't deserve to drop under teams that didn't play in championship weekend. They played an extra game. I mean, like that was a real issue. But with this,
Oregon fans are really sad. Well, Oregon fans are really sad that Ohio State got a quote unquote easier draw. right?
Exactly. There was some serious issues, but I just don't think that a 14 to 16 expansion would solve it. It would almost create an even more problems that we don't foresee, because we don't even know 100% exactly what all of the issues are in the 12-team playoff. Like, we gave the 14 playoff a shot, a real shot, man. It was around for 10 years.
Yep.
Like, that got its chance, and we knew exactly what was wrong with it. And then when they moved to 12, they probably should have moved to 8 first. But when they moved to 12, we saw all these different things, and we try to forecast as much as we possibly can in college football, but it's almost impossible to do without these games to be played. And then after 1 year, we want to move to 14 to 16 and then potentially keep these conference championship games. I mean, I don't know if that's
well. And if you go to 16, I mean, why are you stopping there? Right? I mean,
yeah. In life, you hate hearing the argument like, if you start, it'll never end, or if you make this
slope.
one,
yeah,
exactly. And it's just like sometimes it feels like it applies, other times it doesn't. Right now, it feels like we're sliding down that slope, and it won't stop. Like, this is starting to get to a point where, like, I have no argument now to it stopping at 16. I mean, there's like 100. What's the number for FBS teams? 130 or something like that.
130.
Yeah, it's a massive amount.
But you're not going to have 130 anymore if you keep doing this, because eventually it's just going to be like we can't do this, and like they're already fighting for scraps as it is, and so with the essentially the Big Ten and the SEC getting their top 4 teams in, like I said, you'd be pulling in like 3-4 loss teams into the playoffs some years. And it's just like,
have we felt like we haven't found a champion? Now look, before I get just strictly into the football, I get conferences, college football, politics, and money, is probably what is driving this. But like, do we feel like there were some real serious issues with the 12-team playoff last year where we didn't find the champion, or in the 14 playoff where we didn't find the champion, that it needs to be fixed immediately?
That's exactly, yeah.
I don't think so at all. I have no doubt in my mind that Ohio State was the best team, and I think it's good that they got a second shot after losing to Michigan. Like,
they were.
I like that. I like that about the sport now.
Like, I don't mind the mullet. Yeah, you're right, because if you keep expanding, you're not finding the best team always. I mean, the best team doesn't always win college basketball national championships, right?
No.
Like, how often does the best team actually win? And and how often does the best team actually win the Super Bowl? And college football is one of those rare sports where most of the time in college football, the best team wins the national title. That doesn't mean the best team like preseason ranked 1, because that's not the best team. That's the respect that you have for the team going into the year. But by the end of the year, you have a pretty good idea of who the best team is. And most times the best team wins the championship.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. And I would almost even argue too, just in the defense of college basketball or any of the other sports leagues, like, if you're the last team left standing, like, more power to you. Like, that does mean something. But like for college football, like, you're right. Like,
that's college football's deal. Path. Yeah.
And that is, it brings us almost all the way back to the Notre Dame USC thing. What makes college football so great? The atmospheres, the fact that you, without a shadow of a doubt now, in my opinion, because I do feel like sometimes you had like 3 teams in the BCS area that deserved a shot, but now without a shadow of a doubt, you're going to get the best team, because you're not just going to get some team that can sneak in and win a football game for 60 minutes and they would have won 1 out of the 10 games, something like that. No matter what, you earned it into the playoff and you deserve to be there. You put together a resume in the regular season and you were able to win the battle of attrition too, because injuries are definitely a part of it now, especially with the 12-team playoff. And you got all the way there and you proved that you were the best team in the sport for that specific year. That's so great. It's like, college football had such an issue with this before the 14 playoff, and even like before like the BCS national championship game.
Before the BCS, especially.
Sure. Yeah. And it was like you had the issue, and then we seem to have at least solidified that part of it. But now we're going to a point where, as you mentioned, for college basketball, you're going to get teams that slip in here and do make a run. Like, that is going to be a very real thing. And it's like, maybe that's enjoyable, but on the other end, you're going to get teams that are like, what was the regular season even for?
What was it for?
Like,
what was it for? What was Oregon's season for? and one of the things about even if you go back to the BCS, I mean, you hate to say it, but like, what is the biggest slight of the BCS era? Like, what team absolutely positively deserved to have played in the national championship that did not and would have won the national championship if they played in there? Like, was it TCU? No, get out of here. Utah? Absolutely not. I think that they deserved a chance. That's why I like the 14th playoff. They should have deserved a chance to do it, but they weren't. I mean, they weren't the number one team in the country. I mean, it's not like we've ever deprived the number one team in the country the opportunity to play for the championship. So, I mean, I'm for giving, and that's why I like the 4-team playoff, and it wasn't really conference affiliated. Because it allowed for the 4 best teams, which are the ones I think are most deserving. And that's why when you get to 16, it's like there aren't 16 deserving teams in college football. That's not what the sport's been about for 100 years. Why I didn't have a problem with the 14, and I really didn't have a problem with the BCS too much either. But like,
yeah, I actually very much agree. There's been a silent movement of like people kind of whenever news like this comes out of being like, wait, hold on. Was the BCS even really that bad? Like what? Like where have we gone? We have lost the path. We have lost the direction. I remember being a 14 playoff truther. I was out here preaching, holding up signs, protesting that we should have and keep this 14 playoff. I get why it ended up going. I think it just ended up becoming like almost an oligarchy of those teams that actually ended up making it and stuff like that. But like there were so many semifinal blowouts. Like there was absolutely, plenty of times, and there were respectable programs too, like those Oklahoma teams. Couldn't play any defense, but and they were.
Notre Dame was on the receiving end of 2 of them, and we just justify that by like Notre Dame in both their games. Yes, they were blown out, but they were blown out by less than the eventual team that national championship played in the championship. Whether it was Clemson got beat by more than I think Alabama did to us, and then
same for Clemson.
Clemson, they reciprocated. So to Ohio State, right? Did they beat Ohio State? I can't. Yeah, something like that. But
yes, I believe
they were on the receiving end of worse blowouts each team. So whatever. But I mean, Notre Dame shouldn't have probably been in a BCS championship that game. It's nice they got the opportunity, but they should not have. I mean, Notre Dame this year should not have been in a BCS national championship game. You lost to
Northern
NIU. That should be disqualifying in a BCS era, and it would have been, but they're not because it's not the BCS era, and they got a shot and they went and they won. But they were good the rest of the year. It's not like they were. I mean, Ohio State in 2014 lost to a middling Va-Tech team at the start of the year and bounced back and won the Natty in convincing fashion over Alabama.
I think we got to keep finding that sweet spot, that middle of the road solution. That is where the mulligan should belong. Maybe not so much in the playoffs when, or not 2 or 3 mulligans, but not so much as you get into the point of like, we don't want to see nothing too crazy. And then also,
I'm fine with a mulligan, but I don't need you're not taking 2 or 3. Like if I'm playing golf with you and you want to pull a mulligan because you shanked one off into the swamp off on the the side, I'll give you a mulligan. But if you shank another one into the swamp, I am not giving you a mulligan. You are dropping that puppy and you're hitting from there with a stroke penalty. Like, I'll give you a mulligan, but I'm not giving you 2. And that's what I don't like is now we're talking like we're already at 2. And now we're talking about, well, I'm going to give you 3. Now you get 3 mulligans. And it's like,
it's
and USC's ducking Notre Dame and it's expanding with a guaranteed 4 Big Ten teams and they're ducking. It's just like,
and also here's my thing with this expansion too, is I remember when it was 4 teams, I was kind of like banging my fist on the table and saying like, look, the sport will catch up. So everybody was like, oh, it was lopsided at the top. And I was like, well, we're going to actually end up getting a point where there are like 6 deserving teams. And like those top 6 teams are going to be able to play the top 2 teams, there's Clemson and Alabama for a minute there. And it was like, they're going to be able to make these games close. And it seemed like the 14 playoff was propping up some of those programs to the point where it was tougher to catch them, unless those other teams got a shot. And now I think as time goes on, I think college football will be able to adjust to a 12-team playoff. We won't see the blowouts that we saw in the first round because of the NIL era and the transfer portal, everything like that. And the sport will have a chance to catch up. But right now, where it's at, like 1 year was not enough. Like we will just be saying the same thing again in the first round next year if there are 16 teams, and that is, why did we need to see this? Genuinely, why?
I have a question for you.
Okay.
This one's going to cut deep. Do you think that UCF would have won the national title in 2017?
Of course not. No.
I was just checking because I needed to get a baseline, right? So because UCF is one of those teams that I think that's why I like an 8, because I think that they were a team that was jobbed from a playoff appearance. I don't think that they would have won the national title, but I would have loved to have seen them get a chance. But because they didn't even have the mulligan, man, they just didn't get a shot. And so that's why I'm okay with it expanding beyond 4. If we're going to do it, that's why I wanted 8. And I'm like begrudgingly at 12, and I don't love 12. But now 16 or even 14 it's just 14 is a placeholder. 14 is like you're dipping your toe in the water before you go to 16, right? You're not going to stay at 14. It will get to 16 if you go to 14. So it's like, how long are we at 14 then? If they do go 14, like how long do you think that was?
Yeah, no, not very long. If 12 only lasted 1 year, or 1 or 2 years, like if 14 to 16 would probably just be one season, if not one off season, and they have an agreement at 14, and then later on in the summer they just move to 16. Like it would legitimately, I think, be so quick. I'm glad you brought up UCF. One thing about that is like if they had made the playoffs in this era or in an 18 playoff era, like they would have had that upset over Auburn or something. But that also kind of does bring the next game, which while you may have an amazing moment in college football in the first round, they could have just proceeded to get crushed by the next team following them. And it's just like, that's not good for the sport. That's not good for the product. I want to give these teams plenty of chances, but just some people, you just got to recognize if you're the 16th seed, like the odds are right now as college football is, we don't have enough parity for that to even be an interesting or entertaining game. And it's like at a certain point, I always thought it would be great for the sport for those teams to have shots, but not that far down. And it does end up, in my opinion, hurting the sport. Like that weekend of college football where the first round of the playoffs like weren't good. It was more so fun to see. And I think a direction where the sport can kind of catch up is parity wise. But like if 3 years from now that doesn't get fixed, or we're at 16 teams and we're wondering why that's still happening, that's just simply not good for college football.
Like take Indiana, for example, right? So Indiana has maybe the best season in their program's history. And they got to go to the playoff in this 12-team format. You played a Notre Dame team that absolutely steamrolled you. And other than like the garbage nonsense at the end with like the third stringers in there and the onside kick and the whole 9, right? They didn't do anything all game. And is that better for your season to, remember your season getting blown out by Notre Dame? Or if you would have went 11-1, and then you go to a good bowl game, and then you win that bowl game and you end the season 12-1. I mean, what's the better alternative? Just getting dog walked in a first round playoff game, or playing, a memorable win at the end of your season, if you're one of those programs? I mean,
that's such a great point, and it's not something that honestly I had really thought about. Like, it is so much better because the way that season ended for Indiana was just felt like that they were more so. It was in everybody ganging up on them, telling them that I told you so, or Kurt Signetti's like stock is dropping, or Indiana clearly didn't have the players. See, we were right. Like they're not on that level. Like if they had just simply gotten a bowl game that nobody watched and half the players,
or if it was a good bowl game like UCF, right? The team that got in over UCF, ultimately was Alabama, right? They were the 4 seed despite losing earlier in the year. But then, UCF goes and they play Auburn in the Peach Bowl. And what's the biggest win in UFC program history? Is it not number 7 Auburn? Yeah, I mean, the memories of that are just phenomenal. I mean, it's just
They still have the 2017 championship like banners around campus. Like I know everybody knows the one in the stadium in the bounce house. It's still on campus.
You get
like
it forever.
There's a thing there. Yeah, you get it forever. It's supposed to be big. Like that's another thing definitely to look at. Now I will say the money that comes in, I'd imagine, from these college football playoff games are probably absurd. And that is truly why this is all going on. Is just these teams are saying, like, you know what, it would be nice to end on a high note, but it'd also be nice to end $7.5 million richer.
I mean, the conferences all share that money anyway. So like Notre Dame gets to pocket the money. And
that's exactly why you don't join a conference.
That's why you don't join a conference. I mean, Notre Dame doesn't have to pay union dues essentially, because they negotiate their own, which not everybody can do that. I mean, Michigan State can't do that. They can go out on their own, but Notre Dame can. And I don't understand why you would want to punish someone that can do it because you can't. That seems very anti-American, if you ask me.
And it's also not like they're doing it and just choosing not to play anybody.
Right. I mean, they could do that.
You try as much as you possibly can to foresee how good a team or a program is going to be in 10 years when you schedule it initially. That's what's wrong with college football. That's a college football thing. That's Notre Dame. That's just what they've been dealt. You have to try to pick and choose some of these teams and keep up the rivalries. And if they're bad, they're bad. It just is what it is. You only have a handful of games that you can change as the years go on. So Notre Dame tries to schedule pretty much as best as they possibly can. And they do a good job of doing that for sure.
And that's what I think makes they don't. And that's what I think makes me angry a lot about these things and the recent trends in it is Notre Dame is one school that respects tradition above all else. Like they shouldn't be playing Navy every year, man. It's like the wear and tear from the trip, having to play a triple option. You have to do install practices starting in fall camp, and you have to devote time leading up to the game. You have to have players cross training at special positions for it. You got to worry about, cut blocks and chop blocks and your knees of your players. And it's a grind out game and it's gross and it doesn't help you in any of the other games that you play, but they do it to respect the tradition of the matter. It doesn't make them any money. But they do it to respect the Naval Academy and, the contributions made in, World War II, a Wookiee life debt, if you will. They want to keep the USC rivalry going. They aren't getting reciprocated. They find out that it might not. What do? They go and they sign a 10-year contract with Clemson. And you have Alabama coming up in the schedule. And you just got over an Ohio State home and home. You have Texas A&M on a home and home slate. You have Michigan coming back. They're doing things to accent their schedule and to provide entertainment and matchups that people want to see, and all while maintaining their rivalries. And then people are coming at them in the comment sections, and I see one we have here: grow a pair and join a conference. And it's but Notre Dame is not part of a conference. They've never been part of a conference. It is the one absolute in college football in your lifetime is that Notre Dame has never been in a conference. Whatever conference there is, a team was not in that conference at one point. The Big Ten was not always the Big Ten, and those schools were not in there. The constant is Notre Dame not being in a conference, and it's cool. It's like seeing a dragon, right? It's like a mythical creature, and it's like you could kill the dragon and steal all its money. No, don't do that. It's cool. It's a cool mythical thing. You should respect Notre Dame and what they stand for in the sport. They stand for what college football is all about, stupid rivalries and trophies and, doing ridiculous things like playing these cross-country schedules. And they're not doing the advantageous thing for them to have playoff access. They gave up in the negotiations a first-round bye. Notre Dame just wants to keep this sport healthy. When COVID came, right, and everyone else in the Pac-12 and the Big Ten, and it's looking like the sport is going to waffle and cancel the season, what did Notre Dame do? They got to the table. They joined the ACC. The ACC stepped up and resumed play because Notre Dame said that they were committed, and then the rest of football continued. And Notre Dame doesn't get their laurels for that. They're not out there asking for it, but we still have to sit here and listen to people grow a pair and join a conference. Get out of here with that nonsense. You look like a fool, or you look like you're just a troll, willingly and, just ignoring what is right there in front of you. I don't understand the hate. You can hate Notre Dame for a lot of reasons, but you should like the fact that they exist as this like mythical creature in the sport of college football.
I love it. I love it. I almost I don't know how we can top that today. I got to be honest. That was great. I completely agree. Everything that you just said, just phenomenal. Everything that we've talked about today has been the like want to keep this sport as good as it possibly can in the world where these athletes get that pay that they deserve. Where we have an expanded playoff, where the conferences are realigning at a rate that's faster than anything that we've ever seen in this sport. And Notre Dame continues to just be the beam of light in plenty of other positives as well, but in this sport, that one constant. Very glad that you said that.
No, I just, and that it ties back into everything. And just as Notre Dame fans, we hold such reverence for these traditions and the history and just the game itself, because we don't have a conference, right? So we don't have that secondary entity that we're rooting for. We're just rooting. It's Notre Dame and it's the sport. And for, other teams, it's your school, your conference, and then the sport. And I think that when you look at things from a conference, you're looking to destroy the sport at large. And, I just, as a Notre Dame fan, I can't get behind that.
Yeah, I agree. Do you have a recommendation for me to end this on anything that I should be consuming media-wise?
Have you gotten on Andor Season 2 yet?
On what, Season 2?
Andor Season 2. So it's have you seen...
I have not seen Season 1.
Oh, man. So have you seen Star Wars Rogue One?
Yes, I have. Yes.
They try. It's about the story of stealing the Death Star plans, right?
Yes. Yep. In the middle of 3 and 4.
Yep. In the middle of 3 and 4, like right before 4.
Oh yeah, right before 4. Yeah.
So they have a series, and I'll admit I grew up a giant Star Wars nerd. Like the 97 re-releases hit right at like a perfect point in my life, and read all the books and all that kind of stuff. Didn't love the prequels. I like them now as memes, and I haven't appreciated I have not liked what Disney has done outside of Rogue One with George Lucas property. Having said that, Rogue One or Andor is a television show based off of the character from Rogue One, and it is absolutely phenomenal. The first one it's like spy espionage. There's no space wizards with laser swords, none of that. So if that's the stuff that you like for Star Wars, there's none of that. If it's the stuff that turns you off, well, it's more like the first one's they're all espionage thrillers. The first one's like part espionage thriller, part like prison escape. It's like not the Star Wars that you think, but it all takes place, for this guy that it's the forming of the rebellion. So like Mon Mothma plays a huge role, and the Ortegas, Leia's parents, they play a huge role, and you see the pieces leading up to it. And it's not your usual sort of schlocky Star Wars, and it's not, I didn't like I haven't really liked any of the live action shows. I didn't even like the Kenobi one. But this one, that's not fair. I did like season 1 Mandalorian, and I watch all the Mandalorians dutifully, but season 1 was the special one. The other ones are all kind of throwaway. Anyway, Andor, if you like political intrigue, it's a serious adult television show that you'll be surprised, especially in season 2, that this is a Disney property. They're very, they do some like rated R stuff. And so if you're more in tune with seeing a more rated R, like hard Star Wars, like hard science fiction, it's very good. And so I if you haven't seen it yet, you're in for a treat. It's a real solid watch, and it should be at the top of your queue. It's very good.
I am a Star Wars fan myself. This is just a meeting of the generations, so to speak. But I remember growing up with the prequels, and I loved
the prequels. Yeah,
I was like, and it's that nostalgia. I like sand. Like it is what it is. I liked it, but yeah, no, the sequels were not my favorite. Just the way that it was.
They didn't have a plan, and you could say this about the prequels.
And the changing of the directors too.
Yeah, the changing of the directors who had different visions, and I mean, you can say I think Revenge of the Sith is a legitimately good movie. The third of the prequel movies,
Yes.
I did think that was legitimately good. There's some clunky dialogue, but it was legitimately good and better than anything. Better than any of the new trilogy. But yeah, if you liked Rogue One, and even if you didn't really like Rogue One a whole lot, it's still phenomenal Star Wars property. It's the best thing that they've ever done, probably since Empire.
Ooh.
Yeah. It's better than Mandalorian.
I'll have to put that on my watch list. Well, thank you everybody who stopped in to the live stream. This has been another great talk, Notre Dame football. We are 96 days away, I think, from week 0. That comes from Jackson Johnson, who told me this before we got on a little bit ago. So it's inching ever close, under 100 days. But
yeah,
we'll see. Yep. We'll see you guys same time next Monday.
All right.